Hello, I'm Anmol Malik, and I'm the author of the upcoming book, A Plain Story, published by HarperCollins. It is a heartwarming read this winter. It's a story of two plain people who, from the start, were quite plainly meant to be. It's about Dev and Tara. His girlfriend is getting married to her boyfriend, and that's how two strangers meet on a plane to go break that wedding. But if you remember, in 2010, a volcanic eruption disrupted air traffic globally and airports were shut down. And that's how Dev and Tara find themselves stranded on Heathrow. This is where our story begins. Do they ever get to the wedding? And what happens there? And since this book reads so much like a movie, I'm going to read out the next scene, aka chapter. Here is where Dev and Tara are discussing what they're going to do once they do get to the wedding. He says, I thought I'd just storm in there, you know. Ye shaadi nahi ho sakti so. Tara looks at him. That's your plan. That's your shit plan that brought us here and is taking us to a different continent. I don't know why I was expecting anything practical from you. Dave, if you must know, I booked this flight specifically so that I would land there 2 days in advance. I would freshen up, look good. Wow, Tara, kitni baar shaadiyan todi hai? Don't tell me you didn't choose this flight for the same reason. I literally clicked on the first flight that showed up. Look at what I'm wearing. Do you really think I thought this through? I could deduce that looking at your life. Wow, deduce and all. Talking to you is like making out with the thesaurus. Actually, you know what? You and Matt do make sense because I think that both of you have areas of interest like SAT questions, entrance exams, dictionaries. Ho gaya? If you like watching movies and reading books that make you feel happy and feel good, then A Plain Story, which is releasing on December 16th, should definitely be on your list. And if you've enjoyed my debut novel, Three Impossible Wishes, I hope A Plain Story is just as charming and it is a really fun ride. So hop on board. Thank you so much for having me as a part of your festival, and I'm really happy that I could share A Plain Story with you.
Welcome back to Studio One. We are now going to understand what it takes to write true life portrayals of legends. The research involved, especially as the legends are not there for verification. Let us begin this interesting discussion tracing the lives of legends. I welcome our guests, Ms. Kishwar Desai, Mr. Yasser Usman, Ms. Ritu Menon, and Ms. L. Aruna Dhir. Mr. Kishwar Desai is an award-winning author and playwright who writes both fiction and non-fiction. Kishwar is the author of Darling G, the true love story of Nargis and Sunil Dutt. Kishwar's first work of political non-fiction, Jallianwala Bagh, the real story, won critical acclaim and inspired exhibitions on the massacre in India, the UK, and New Zealand. Her latest book is The Longest Kiss, the life and times of Devika Rani, based on the personal papers and letters of the iconic actress. The book has emerged from a 15-year search for documents and material. Mr. Yasser Usman is an award-winning TV journalist and the author of 4 best-selling film biographies. Rajesh Khanna, The Untold Story of India's First Superstar. Rekha, The Untold Story, and Sanjay Dutt. His recent book is the critically acclaimed Guru Dutt, An Unfinished Story. He has been a recipient of the prestigious Ramnath Goenka Award for Excellence in Journalism, Indian Telly Award, Red Ink Award, among many others. Miss Ritu Menon is a publisher and the author of, among others, the groundbreaking Borders and Boundaries, Women in India's Partition, the critically acclaimed Out of Line, a literary and political biography of Tara Segal, and the quirky Loitering with Intent, Diary of a Happy Traveler. The discussion will be led by Miss L. Aruna Dhir. She is a recognized international hospitality writer, a poet par excellence. Aruna has the distinction of being India's first ever creative writer with Archie's Greetings, with several series of cards sold under her byline, an unprecedented feat that has not been repeated since. An All India topper in her PR degree, Aruna has been a columnist with leading national dailies and has done shows on Indian radio and television. I now request Miss Dhir to begin the interesting discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hello,
Look
hello
forward to a
everyone.
great session with all of you scintillating people there, really. As I'm sitting on the cusp of the launch of my new book, it is both fortuitous and propitious that I am amidst you to talk about the lives of legends that you have chosen to, write about. Hotel Adventures with the Stars, my book that is soon to be launched in the early part of 2022 by Vishwakarma Publications, is an account of my interactions with a set of, interesting celebrities who I had the privilege of meeting and interacting with during the course of my career with some of the grandest hotels. And here I have you who've written full fledged, full blown biographies on such famous names. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow has said these enchanting lines. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and when departing, leave behind us we can the sands of time. Towards that, your work has been absolutely, significant in the way you have traced the lives of legends that you have written about. Your work has also been extremely essential because you have chosen to depict the society as it existed in the timelines that your books have been set in. I think that is truly fascinating. You all are such prolific writers. Besides that, you wear multiple hats, all of them as successful. Ritu, you are a publishing icon, and you are, to my mind, one of the sanest voices amongst our intelligentsia. And I
Well,
truly mean Kishwar, well, what do I say? You're Lady Kishwar, you are a baroness. Your work on the Gandhi statue and the Partition Museum is outstanding. You are a chair of the Rich Cultural and Art Heritage Trust. Your books are doing amazingly well. And Yasser, what do I say? You are quite the media person.
voice is going off.
Yeah.
Can't hear.
Yeah.
Can't hear you.
The frame is like frozen.
No, it's a problem from their end.
Yeah,
Are
it's a
we
problem from
connected
there.
still? Are we?
Yeah.
Can we hear each other now?
Yeah,
Can you hear
just
me,
about.
Yasser?
Yeah.
Okay. Are we all right? Kishwar, are you
Yeah.
okay with
Yeah,
us?
yeah, we're fine.
Yeah,
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 we
it's
can hear
fine
you.
now.
Fantastic.
Fine.
So Yasser, I was saying that you're quite the media person. You're the media wizard. You're in the center of the media circus, and you have been triumphing over the game. Admirably with million, 2 million, 3 million hits to your shows. So really, absolutely astounding work by all of you. My panelists here. I have to say that, Stephen King, John Steinbeck, even Oprah have talked about this. And that is my favorite question to you. So, my icebreaker really is with so much on your plates. How do you, what is your personal regimen and process of involved in your writing work? Is there a writing schedule that you have developed for yourselves and adhere to? If you tell us, I'll go from one to or the other, and if you can tell us, that would really be motivating for our audience and our viewers. Kishwar, should I start with you?
Sure. So you want to know about how we get around to doing our writing in the midst
Yes,
of all the other things that one does. I'm
absolutely.
sure each one of us has a very different style of working, but with me, it's always been that I tend to get completely absorbed and obsessed with whatever I'm working on at that time. And often it can take, therefore, like with the book on Devika Rani, it took a very long time because this was a woman that I learned about when I had gone to the National Film Archives. That's when I came across her life story for the first time, but in very brief sort of snatches. But then she obsessed me for many years, and I kept on collecting the material on her. And that was a very, very long journey, which practically took me all over the world. It took me to Australia, it took me to America, it took me to Bangalore, to Bombay, to Delhi, to Calcutta, just collecting material, but I was lucky. However, the actual process of writing is something which I totally get absorbed in. As I said, I get obsessed with it. So I get up in the morning, I have no other thought. I just love to enter that particular world of that particular book that I'm dealing with. So I take care to finish all my other activities before that, even if it means getting up early in the morning, because once I'm in the book, I'm just in the book and I do not know where the day goes. Just carry on writing. It can be till midnight, it can be till 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and that then becomes my routine, which is why when I get down to writing, I do a lot of research, a lot of research. Even for Devika Rani, I had something like 4,000 documents, maybe more, and 2 suitcases full of material. But when I sit down to write, then the whole world I need to shut off completely. Of course, one carries on doing, as I said, other things, but it is like becoming a hermit. It is like a lockdown.
Yes,
That's
yes.
what I do when I am writing. Then the rest of the world just simply ceases to exist. It is that's why I write very fast. When I actually get into my books, then usually I write them within 3 or 4 months, or maybe 5 months at the most. So that's the process.
Okay, Aruna is missing again.
Yeah, she's gone off.
But hi, Ritu, hi, Kishwar and Yasser. And
I think,
wonderful to be.
yeah, really nice to see everybody. I mean, it's so good. The
Yeah, yeah,
power of the internet now.
yeah.
We can
Seriously,
all be connected from different worlds, almost. uh,
truly wonderful.
yeah. So I think we have to wait for her to come back
Yeah,
before
yeah, I
we.
think so.
Yeah.
Are you working on the new book, Kishwar?
Yes, yes, yeah. The museum we're setting up in
Yeah, yeah.
Delhi after the
Uh-huh.
one in Amritsar. This has been pretty time consuming because the constant pandemic, kabhi on, kabhi off, kabhi lockdown, kabhi ye wo. So it's been taking a little longer, but it is something we want to do by in the 75th year. I haven't given it a deadline now. I was giving it a deadline earlier, but now during the 75th year of India's independence and partition, very keen to. So that is something which one is working. But I've started my work on the new book, which is another biography. Always difficult to do,
True.
because
Yeah, yeah.
so much material. In
It,
fact, I'm just thinking of taking a break, Yasser, to just write a novel, which I've been dreaming of doing. So I was thinking maybe one can just do that. Okay,
please do
there's
that.
a
Please do that.
message. There's a
Yasser could
message.
please take over. Yeah, it
Yeah,
says Yasser
Yasser.
could please take
Yasser,
over.
could you? Yeah. So perhaps
I
you
have
could
to
give.
take.
Yeah, why don't you start with your own experience of writing and then pass it on to Ritu? Yeah.
I think let's talk about the process of writing. That how Ritu began, and you were talking about that. Aruna began, and I would like to know Ritu's process. I know slightly. I know about. We have discussed it earlier, also Kishwar. But Ritu, can you tell us about your writing process, the way you approach your
You
books?
know, I kept thinking while Kishwar was speaking that of course, the research part takes forever. I mean, to me, it's the most interesting part. The writing actually is not nearly as interesting as the research. And that, of course, takes its own time. And it also depends on how much access you have to material and so on. Um, And because I have a full-time job and I'm, a full-time publisher, I can't actually put that aside in order to do the research or the writing. So it always happens in snatches, and I can never ever estimate how long it's going to take, because I have no way of knowing when I'll actually get the time to write or to travel or to collect the material, to do the interviewing, to do the sifting, the primary research, the secondary research. I mean, it's all, and then I actually get so involved in the research that sometimes I forget that there's a book that needs to be written.
Very true. I think that happens with all of us.
Everything that's collected, because all that is so absorbing.
Yeah.
And as you say, you get lost in that. You're in
Yeah,
another
yeah,
time, you're in another
yeah.
place, you're in someone else's mind, you're
True,
in someone
true.
else's life. But the actual writing, I write everything by hand. I don't work on a computer. And because I write by hand, I have to actually be very, very strict with myself about what I write, because I can't bear the thought of endlessly rewriting and redrafting. And, it's not like working on a computer. So people tell me it's very easy to shift and to change and to add and to subtract and so on. I can't do that. I mean, I don't like to do that. And because I write by hand, it takes me a little longer to actually decide what to write. One of the most difficult things, and maybe we can discuss that later, and I think this is particularly true of biography writing, is what to leave out. Not
Yeah,
what to put in,
Yeah,
but
very
what
tough.
to leave
yeah,
out.
yeah.
Yeah.
That takes me some time, because as all of both of you know, you have a vast amount of material. Not all of it needs to go in. Not all of it needs to be written. So that part of the work actually is what I do when I'm writing. It's when I'm writing that I begin to do the
Sifting.
editing, if you like, and because I don't know, maybe because I'm also an editor and a publisher, I keep editing myself. So,
So no,
the process,
I understand what you're saying, because I understand obsession. I understand getting absorbed, getting consumed, because it's when I was writing my Rekha book, it wasn't easy to go to bed thinking about Rekha while writing about Sanjay Dutt, thinking about Sanjay Dutt कि कल तो जेल गया था अब drugs में फंस गया. It is not easy, because it's
yes,
going to take the next 1 year of your life, at least,
exactly.
the writing part, after the research, and yes, the research takes a long time, and that's the part, like Kishwar said, that's the part I enjoy more than the writing process, because you get to meet people, you get to meet the family, you get to meet the co-stars, the
Right.
friends and family of the subject, and that's the most exciting part of this journey, which I enjoy the most, of course, more than writing. But
Right.
yeah, getting consumed by someone, and what to take in the book, what to leave. Like when I was writing this Sanjay Dutt book, Kishwar's Darling Ji was one of the main research material, and I was like totally zapped by the amount of research she has put into. And I thought, itna zyada likh diya hai. Sometimes I thought कि थोड़ा कम भी हो सकता था, but then while you're writing, I would like to know it from Kishwar that it was a complete epic, very detailed, like you're talking about Nargis's grandmother, Nargis ki mother, in detail, and the book was about Nargis and Sunil Dutt, but the detailing was outstanding. I must say that it was, for my book also, it was greatly helpful. So this the valid point, that what to take and what to leave, and who has to decide that. Do you think as a writer you have the right to do it? Because a lot of times after my books are published, गुरुदत्त पे निकल के आया तो बोला नहीं वो वाला चैप्टर नहीं था, there was this incident with Gurudutt and Pradeep Kumar or Rajkumar. I said, वो तो आप भूल ही गए. I said, yeah, but this is not a diary.
Exactly.
I am not writing the everyday account of someone's life. So I have the right to choose, and I have the right to edit. So how do you decide it? First
Yeah.
Kishwar and then Ritu. I would like to know that.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up Darling Ji, because, and thank you for referring it for your research. And definitely, that has been very good to hear from various people, because it's also was used as a text in some universities and things like that. Because what happened with the Darling Ji, both with Darling Ji and with The Longest Case, was that I did come across a lot of original material, both Darling Ji as well as, I would say even more The Longest Kiss. There were very few people who actually knew the reality of both these women, both Nargis and even Sunil Dutt to a large extent, because I had access to their diaries. In the case of Nargis and Sunil Dutt, I had access to their diaries, which were like completely hidden from the world. People did not even know, their own children also didn't know about the existence of these diaries, because they came out after Sunil Dutt's death, and they were in his cupboard. So, and they were little diaries. Literally, I had to read them with great, sort of spend hours reading them and trying to decipher. And then it was like a jigsaw puzzle, because nobody else knew about their secret life of their love together and the details that she put into it. Her, her meetings with Raj Kapoor, and then what happened. No one knew about all this. So therefore, I felt that even for history, so that when we have to take our subjects very seriously, even if they are, as people say, film stars. But I felt that they're very iconic, and they represent the people, and their own backgrounds were fascinating, because one was a Hindu, one was a Muslim in Nargis and Sunil Dutt's case. So therefore, how did they come together? How did they reconcile? How did they lead such a public life when you look at what is happening today? And they led it very publicly, and they adjusted and accommodated. So it was very important to go into Nargis's own backstory, because when you go into the backstory, you realize that her grandmother started as a Hindu, then she converted to being a Muslim, and Nargis started life as a Muslim and then converts to being a Hindu. So it's like there is so much free flowing acceptance in the family. So I thought that was also a very important point to bring out when you mentioned. In terms of Devika Rani, again, it was really a very, very tough thing to do, because of course, she was a big star in the 30s and the 40s. And after that, she becomes a recluse when she marries Svetoslav and she goes away. So nobody really knows. And she was, as I discovered when I got these letters, which run into 25, 28, sometimes even 60 pages, and she is pouring her heart out to Svetoslav, and she's describing what had happened to her. And that's when I realized that this woman had so much more to her. She's not just a film star, but she's also a woman of her time. She's also a great businesswoman, because I got access to the papers of Bombay Talkies. Now, Yasser, it was very tough, because I had to literally, my whole house was covered with the papers, because I had to go out and, go from room to room and figure out, okay, so this happens at this point. And then I'd go to another room and pick out that piece of paper that matched her letter, which matched the description of what was happening in Bombay Talkies and what was the meeting that took place, which she describes very informally in her letters, and behind the scenes, what she is thinking as she takes over Bombay Talkies, because that was another very interesting narrative in that. So therefore, I agree with you that it's a very tough task to actually sit down to figure out, to sift, when you have, like I did, a really, in both the case of The Longest Case and Darling Ji, I got really excellent material, which was straight from, and which was not based on somebody else telling me, but which was based on what they themselves had written about their lives at that time. So that was really fortunate. And that is sometimes when you're passionate about something, you just are on a trail and bang, you reach that, what I always said was like, the end of the rainbow for me, when I found all those letters of, Devika Rani. So I think it was a tough thing to put in, but then I also am aware of the fact that, some very historical moments took place. People would have never forgiven me if I hadn't mentioned about the rise of Ashok Kumar and based it on her own explanation, what was happening in that life, the setting up of Bombay Talkies.
Of
It
course,
could
the
have been
longest
two books.
kiss.
The longest kiss, yeah, that itself. So that maybe it was the longest kiss. I mean, that's
Yeah,
why
yeah,
I
yeah,
wrote
yeah.
it like that. But if you do want, future generations who will not be as fortunate as exactly what we were discussing earlier in the time of in the pandemic, how do you do your research? Where do you go? I was fortunate that I had traveled and got all the material before the
Yeah.
pandemic, so I could sit and write it. But believe me, today it would be very difficult for anybody to go to those countries.
Yeah.
So I think if somebody reads that book, they will understand what an outstanding woman she was and how little we knew about her even at that time. And I hope after the book has come out, people have learned a bit more. Yeah.
Ritu, what Kishwar mentioned about her research, those letters, those personal letters, there's also a very crucial point of, the thin line between gossip and truth, and the thin line between the professional life and personal life. How much of it a biography should be, about their personal lives, and how much of it should only talk about their professional. And there are this is an endless debate, because I get to fight in almost every lit fest that this biography is too personal, and this is gossip, and this is truth. How do you sift those things? When you're writing about, say, a Zohra Segal, there's a lot of personal and professional things which needs to be taken, because it is a very important part of their lives and their stories and their achievements. How do you decide on that aspect?
I was very interested to hear Kishwar speaking about the different sort of decisions that she made with Nargis and then with Devika Rani, because I had a similar problem when I was doing the biography of Nayanthara Segal and then Zohra Segal. Now, for me, for me, the personal is very, very important. I write about women. I mean, I'm a feminist. I write a feminist biography. What does that mean, actually? So for me, the personal in the choices that women make and the lives that they lead and the direction that those lives take is very important. So I can't actually separate the personal from the professional. I mean, I don't see it as being something that I can do neatly. I can't say this is personal and this is professional. As far as both women were concerned, Nayanthara and Zohrapa, the two things overlap to such an extent that it is not possible to write about one without writing about the other. Now, I also feel that, this is the decision that I took when I decided to locate the personal very centrally in their lives, is what was that critical event, that decisive moment in their personal lives that made them make the professional choices that they made. I think this is a real distinction between writing about a male, for example, a male public figure, a male professional, a male performer, star, sportsman, whatever, and a female. There is a real difference in what I call those decisive moments of when they choose to do what they choose to do. That for me was very critical for both of them. And they were both very personal moments, very personal choices that they made. That then allowed me to actually weave the two together in a very organic way. There was nothing forced about it. There was nothing superimposed or artificial. It was an organic kind of personal, professional, political, in Nayanthara's case, in Zohra's case, the performance, the acting, the personal choices, the where to go, where to live, how to live. Everything was linked. Now, this business of gossip, I decided in both cases. I mean, they are both very, very public figures. There's been a lot of speculation about both. They've had in some ways, very public lives. But I decided, in Nayanthara's case, of course, I was able to spend many hours talking to her and interviewing her, and I had access to all her papers without reserve at all. Like Kishwar says, thousands and thousands of letters and, pages and pages and pages, because she was a woman who wrote. They were writing all the time. They were writing letters all the time. No one writes those kinds of letters now. They
You're
were
so
writing
right.
all the time.
Yeah.
Now I
And
don't really know what our archives will be, because everyone's just tweeting and WhatsApping and,
yeah, you're so right. Those letters are a mine of information.
are a
And what
mine of
was
information.
also Ritu, just
And
to
so,
interject, yeah, sorry.
in both cases, it actually obviated the need for speculation and gossip,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it was all there.
It was all there.
It
Yes.
was all there. You
Yeah.
don't need to speculate. You don't need to go for hearsay. What was invaluable in Zohra's case was being able to interview and talk to her colleagues, fellow actors, directors, apart from family. Family is one thing. That's one side of the story. That's the personal side, if you like. The professional side is the colleagues, the actors, the directors, the filmmakers, the agents. What you get from that, again, is at first hand.
Yeah.
And it allows you actually to get a perspective on that life without resorting to what I think is actually not very credible, which is the gossip or the speculation or the
speculation. Ritu, can I just add one thing here? For the Darling G, I remember doing 50 hours of tape, which is a pain for me, because ultimately I'd interviewed so many people. Then I had to sit and transcribe it, and then because we all work, we do everything ourselves. We do the research. We don't have that kind of money to hire people and do it. So we do it ourselves. And besides, it's an enjoyable journey. I love doing the interviews. I love doing. But Yasser, let's hear from you, because you were very close to Guru Dutt's sister, I think, who then helped you with this last book. Let's hear about that. That's really interesting. Yeah.
How it began, Kishwar, because there are so many books about Guru Dutt, and of course, Guru Dutt is not from my times. I wasn't even born when he was active as a filmmaker. So it began. There was this retrospective of Guru Dutt's cinema at Habitat Center, like when I was in college. So I watched all his films on big screen, and I was totally fascinated. And I realized, okay, I should start reading about this gentleman. And I realized that this person who made Pyasa and who made Kagaz Ke Phool and Sahib Bibi Aur Ghulam, he passed away at the age of 39. And at the same time, I started researching what went in his life and while he was making these films. And for a very long time, I kept on talking to people with his contemporaries and his associates who were alive then. As a journalist, I used to visit Bombay. And I realized that while he was making these films, like when he was making Pyasa, while Pyasa was under production, Guru Dutt attempted suicide for the first time. So it kind of went parallel. This entire personal turmoil of Guru Dutt and the makings of the classics. They were like two tracks going on simultaneously. While he was making Kagaz Ke Phool, he attempted suicide again. So, in your right frame of mind, I don't know what kind of a filmmaker, what kind of a genius he was, that while he was going through all this, and his personal life was, you cannot describe it, was so torturous for him. And yet every morning he was coming to the studio and writing these scenes and shooting these scenes, and wonderful cinematic genius he was. So while I met Lalita ji, his sister, she said, "What are you writing about?" So I was very clear about, like Ritu said, that personal was very important for me. Tons and tons of books have been written about Guru Dutt's cinema. So I don't consider myself an expert in cinema. Like there are better books on cinema, but I wanted to capture his personal journey, his inner turmoil. That was the focus of the book. So I told Lalita ji that I'm trying to attempt this, and she told me in one line ke main Wahida ke bare mein baat nahi karungi. So I said okay, I'm okay with it, and I'll not ask a question about Vahida. So that's how it began, and we started chatting, and it was during the lockdown, those dark days, 2019, early 2019, and Zoom calls and phone calls. And after the lockdown was over, I went to meet her in Bombay, and there were a few. But by the end of it, she kind of trusted me, and she gave me those albums, her personal notebooks, and everything. Not as elaborate as Kishwar got from Sunil Dutt or about her latest book, but it was quite fascinating to hear Gurudat's journey from someone who has actually witnessed it, someone who was very close to Geeta Dutt as well as Guru Dutt. So that was the book was all about his personal turmoil, and how in a few previous accounts, a lot of people, I was very angry about this fact that there are one or two accounts on Gurudat's life which are like you said, you are a feminist writer, Ritu, and there are accounts which says ke Gurudat का सारा turmoil जो था वो गीता की वजह से था, because Geeta used to trouble him, and I was like, ऐसे थोड़ी होता है, it doesn't work like that. And there were people writing ke she was a woman who was into alcohol, and she used to smoke a lot, and she had affairs, and these things written on record, and I spoke with Lalita regarding that, and she said, "Yaar, main kya karu? I don't know where that came from." I was very close. Theirs were not a happy marriage, and you know that's a normal thing. अगर नहीं थी तो नहीं थी, मैं इसमें क्या करूं? और ये ऐसे था, ये ऐसे था, and she has narrated those personal stories in the book, and that's how I think it became special. Like we say, the journey itself was very, very emotional for me. Also, this was one book, but Kishwar, like you said, Ritu bhi wo personal professional wali baat chali thi, and gossip and Rekha became my most successful book, and I got a lot from these things about a lot of writers about the Rekha book, that उसमें यार gossip थोड़ा ज़्यादा हो गया था, and I don't understand this, and I have had long discussions about the Rekha book. I said when I began writing the Rekha book, I tried to get in touch with Rekha. I couldn't get in touch because it's really difficult. She is not accessible to the media. So Gulzar Saab helped me in that, and Gulzar Saab himself called Rekha and said कि इनसे बात कर लीजिएगा, इन्होंने राजेश खन्ना की लिखी थी, ये है वो है सारी बात. So later on I got a call from her saying कि क्या लिख रहे हो, and I you know, I had a presentation kind of think these are the points I want to capture. Again, कि अब किस्सा आ चुकी है और फिल्मों के बारे में बात हो चुकी है, but I want to write about the journey of Rekha. Later on, she said, "नहीं, I would not participate in it, but you can go ahead and write about it." So it became very difficult. There was no access, so I had to go back to the archive. You know, sifting from those 1,000 interviews of Rekha from 1969 to 2012. So there were, and she used to talk to media a lot, and the film media of that time was also more vibrant than it is now. It has now become solid PR, nothing else. So. So my one-line brief was that a girl who came from Madras as a 15-year-old girl, and who was serially abused, who was made fun of, Kali Kaluti, Moti, सब कुछ कहा गया उसको, and there was this long kiss controversy. Without telling Rekha, there was a kiss. The first scene in her first film, the hero and director talked among themselves, किसको बताएंगे नहीं, and there was a long kiss, and it was basically abuse. And post that, how Rekha survived. And 15 years later, this girl who had no clue about Hindi, जिसको हिंदी बोलना भी नहीं आता था, and she goes on to win the national award for Umrao Jan speaking impeccable Urdu. So this was the journey I wanted to capture. और उसके बीच में क्या-क्या हुआ? You know, her husband committed suicide, and she was blamed for it. She black widow, and Diane मेरे बेटे को खा गई. ये सब कुछ, everything happened. So what is gossip and what is not gossip there was a very thin line. So I was sticking to Rekha's interview. So I had, among my research material also, I never took a paragraph which was gossip or which was story. It was all Rekha's voice, all Rekha's
words,
interviews, her own words. That's how the book progresses. Yet, I don't know, the readers and writers, a lot of writers and readers tell me even now, "Arey nahi, yaar, usme zyada scandalous ho gaya tha." I said, but it is a scandalous life. Why do you have a problem with a
So
scandalous life?
I just want to say one thing here, Yasser. Yes, the gossip area is something that we all deal with, because when you're writing about public figures, so let's just say that in India we still have to go to the next step. Abroad, you very often have authorized biographies and unauthorized biographies,
Yeah, true,
and we
true.
need to now move to that level where when people are in public life, if somebody wants to write about it, if they don't cooperate, I'm not saying it's a great way to get the information. It's always easier if they do talk to you, but if they don't, then of course. But the other thing I want to just mention is, when we are talking about gossip, when we're talking about even access to personal papers and so on, one of the very difficult things, and I'm not talking about the editing which we all do with the material, which might have vast material, but also the conscious decision sometimes to leave something out, because
absolutely.
you feel this is now on the edge. This is far too personal. So this is what happened to me definitely in the Nargis and Sunil Dutt biography, where I was very engaged. I used to really think that these characters are in the same room with me. I was like, totally into the story. But there were moments, and there were things which they had written, which to each other, very, very personal stuff, which only I know about, but and I will not talk about it, because I think it would be unfair. In the case of, Devika, it was again a decision that I had to take, that what kind of a character, because when I first started writing the book, I remember my first editor, not Kartika, somebody else, they had looked at it and they said, you are giving a slightly negative impression of her. Your reader will not like it. So I said, look, I am just trying to show her the way she was. She was a brilliant woman. She was a beautiful woman. She was often much brighter than the people that she was mixing with, but she was black and white. She was not black and white, sorry. She was gray. I mean, she had shades of gray, which all characters have. And how can I, when she is being unscrupulous about something, when she is trying to get her way, and she's being what we would call in a man ambitious, but it is not liked in a woman. I mean, how many times did he tell me to just delete this word? This is looking like I said, no, but this is who she was. So I think there is often also that tussle, that when you're presenting a woman the way she actually is, especially I would say for men, it is considered clever and how smart he was, and that kind of thing. But for a woman to do that, be ambitious, stick to her guns, fight for her rights, and not play a victim. That was for me very important, that she did not play a victim. Now that is unacceptable to most people. However, I also stuck to my guns, and I decided that was the story.
That makes it more interesting, Kishwar.
I wanted to add something to this, because this is a very important distinction to make. I mean, as a biographer, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to your subject, not just to the person, of course, but also to the biography itself. It cannot become a hagiography, and it cannot become scurrilous and gutter sort of writing. So that's to the genre, and then to your subject. Now, there was very interesting, this business about how the very, very personal, you have to, and I can say this for a fact in Nayanthara's case, because of course the immense amount of material that I had access to without a single scrap of it being reserved by her meant that I also had to be extremely scrupulous about what to use. And as Kishwar says, there is a great deal in those papers and in those letters that's very personal, to do with Mrs. Indira Gandhi, to do with Nehru, to do with her mother, to do with Feroz Gandhi, that obviously is not part of her story. It's part of the larger story of the Gandhis and the Nehrus and the Pandits, but it's not Nayanthara's story. So you have to make a distinction between whose
So as a
story
writer,
I'm telling.
you have to take the responsibility and to edit it out
I
or
mean,
whatever.
in Zohra's case, for example, there was a whole lot of gossip about Uzra and Prithviraj Kapoor. And the question always arose after Kameshwar committed suicide. So was Zohra involved with Prithviraj after Uzra left Bombay, went to Pakistan, and then Zohra became his replacement, so to speak, in Prithvi Theatres? And I kept having to say, there is no way this can be established. No way that it can be anything other than conjecture. And in fact, I asked Kiran, her daughter, I said, tell me, is this just speculation? What is your view about it? And she said to me, and I put it in the book because it was her saying, she said, Dekho, it's only natural that Ammi had other relationships as well, but it was never Prithviraj.
Okay.
So I said, so who do you think it was? Who could it have been? She said, Agar hota bhi, so I think, and she kept saying, I think it was Shami.
Oh,
Now,
I see.
now the point is, okay, this is something that, is not, I don't call this gossip. I do think it's an interesting aspect. I can't put it down as fact because I don't know, but I can put it down as a kind of possibility. Now, that's another thing that I think we need to decide. The possibility. Is it possible? Could it have been? Which is not the same as speculation. I mean, I think all these very
Fine
fine
lines, yes.
distinctions need to be made. Could
Yeah.
it be possible, knowing what you know of your subject's life, knowing what
You
you
know,
know of
Ritu,
her personality,
yes,
could it be
yes.
possible?
So
And
That
Aruna is
brings
joining
me to
back.
the.
can
Can you
do, I
hear?
think.
Can you hear me now? I'm
Welcome
Yes,
back,
sorry.
yes, we
Aruna.
can hear you. We can see you.
I
Yes.
I don't know what went wrong, the technical glitch, and really sorry about that. And my loss completely. I don't know. And I could hear snatches of it, when I went as a guest. So I really, my sort of lost completely. But you've touched that subject briefly, Ritu, and I'd like you to, all of you to reflect upon that. The biggest peril while doing a biography is one's personal observation or one's personal interpretation of the subject that you're tackling with. So how do you ensure that your work becomes the most definitive documentation on the biography that you're working on? Kishwar, would you like to tell us something about it?
Yes. So if you're talking about your personal observation of the person, well, luckily, in my case, I did not have any such thing. I had no personal sort of agendas or anything, because both the people whose biography I did, both Nargis as well as Devika, were long gone, and I had never personally met them. So all the impressions that I formed really were either from their personal writings or through the people that I extensively interviewed, definitely for Darling Ji, and also for The Longest Kiss. So I think it is possible for you to leave those biases and prejudices. In fact, I think it's a far more exciting journey if you enter into a biography with a very, very open mind, because then you truly get impressed, or you truly get astonished at how much this person had done and or achieved or lived through in their lives, and also the way others had affected them. So I just want to say one thing here, because one of the things as a really startling moment for me was when I was going through Devika's letters, and I realized that she was an abused wife. That her husband had been violent, first husband, that is Himanshu Rai, had been violent towards her, and nobody knew about this. I mean, this was the shocking thing for me, that she put up such an amazing image of this porcelain doll-like, very beautiful, very accomplished woman, and she never ever allowed that sort of persona that she had adopted to fall. She was an excellent actress in that sense. She would just cover up whatever scars she had. And she only told Svetoslav about it because she said that I don't want to play the victim. I feel that whatever I have been through has made me a stronger person. And I will one day, I've promised God that one day that I will work so hard that he will have to reward me in some way or the other. So she made her own pact, with life. And she just decided that she was going to be a successful woman, come what may, even despite the horrible, really at times, terrible patriarchy under which she had to live. So I'm saying
Yes.
that you can change your perception. You can have a perception of a woman. I may have gone into the biography of Devika thinking, oh, what an excellent, beautiful person, great grandniece of Rabindranath Tagore, so accomplished. But when I started reading and the things she says about and what all she herself has done and experienced, some of the most degrading things, which she herself talks about quite openly. And one last thing I want to say here. Do you know, I realized how bold and how forthright she was, because there was one file which was called Anonymous. When I opened that file, she had carefully filed all the anonymous letters abusing her, written to her, and they have been preserved for 70 years afterwards. So can you imagine that she is the one who wanted the world to know the truth about her? She did not hide any of this. She left those boxes very beautifully maintained and kept and preserved, because she probably thought one day somebody's going to know the truth.
Yes, and Ritu, you've done the book on Nayantara Segal, and it's a you've called it the personal and political biography. And we all have our ideological leanings, we sort of have our own adherences. How did you, for example, make sure that your ideology did not weigh in with Nayantara Segal? How did you, put out a very objective account of her political and personal life, really?
Well, unlike Kishwar, I knew both Nayantara and Zohra pretty well. I mean, I've known them both for a long time. I've published both of them. We published Nayantara's letters, that very first sort of exposure of her disastrous first marriage, a little bit like Devika Rani. And in fact, it's actually quite amazing how many of these women go through all that, and they go through it in a way that is not that unusual. I mean, you can imagine if women like Devika Rani and Nayantara Segal had to put up with it, what will be the situation for the majority of other women who don't have their kind of, who don't come from a background that can at least ensure some amount of dignity and self-respect. So
Yes.
I have to say that I personally feel, of course, as I say, I knew both of them personally. I do have to say that part of the reason for choosing them as subjects is because of what I knew about them. It's not only that they are public figures, not only that they were successful and very famous and very accomplished and so on and so forth. It's because also of what I knew about them. And I think that the reason why it became possible for me to be objective while knowing them was because I was able actually to interpret more than I might have been able to if they had been complete strangers to me.
Yes.
If they were no longer familiar to me. But because I knew them, I could make certain interpretive sort of comments. I could write in a certain way, let's say in Nayantara's case, about her novels. I could write in a certain way because I knew what I knew about her. And the same with Zohra. Now, as for ideological, just so happens that I agree with Nayantara at a personal level. So that wasn't a problem. What was a problem, and I did try and deal with it, was that I was not in agreement with her about her assessment of Mrs. Gandhi. I am no fan of Indira Gandhi, but I was not in agreement with her with Nayantara about her. And of course, the real reason for that, which I say in the book, and which perhaps she's not very happy about, I don't know, I've never talked to her about it, nor has she mentioned it, although we remain very good friends. The reason I think for her particular sort of awkward and very public falling out with Mrs. Gandhi was not only because of the emergency, though it was because of Nehru. It was because of the role Nehru played in both their lives. He was the central point of difference. The emergency was just the manifestation of it.
Right.
Nayanthara always thought of herself as his literary heir. And Indira was his political heir, but Nayanthara actually wanted to be his political heir. She never made it because she never entered politics. Indira Gandhi made it because she entered politics, but actually she always wanted to be a writer. This to me was the most interesting factor in Nayanthara's relationship with Indira Gandhi.
Yes.
Now,
Okay.
Nayanthara would never agree with that, but that's my take on it.
Wonderful. Very eye-opening, really. If I talk about myself, and I'm going to get on to Yasser for my next question, I'm very fond of Jackie Shroff, and I'm prepared to cut him a lot of slack. Along with that, I like Sharmila Tagore immensely. The other day there was a discussion about Sharmila Tagore on Facebook, the chapel of social media, as it were, and somebody called her a very haughty Begum, and I would disagree wholeheartedly because because that's not my impression of her or my experience with her. I find her to be very warm, very gracious, very genuine, and then she's a fellow dog person. What I'm trying to get at is that as humans, we have our biases and prejudices that threaten to creep in, with utmost ease. How do you, Yasser, make sure that your work is neither an exercise in incarceration nor a eulogy of the subject you're writing about? How do you stick to the facts, and how do you speak the truth in your books, in your biographies?
Aruna, the main rule that I follow is not to be judgmental about their lives, whatever they have done. The first thing that attracts me towards any subject is the story of their lives, nothing else. Like my first book was about Rajesh Khanna. I was never a fan of Rajesh Khanna. I wrote about Sanjay Dutt. I was not a fan of Sanjay Dutt, but Sanjay Dutt's case I covered as a journalist. So I was very fascinated about the fact that this gentleman is the son of Sunil Dutt and Nargis Dutt. Just look at them and what he turned out to be, what went wrong in his upbringing, in his life, and also the fact that despite all these hiccups, despite his drug phase, his Tada case, his multiple times he went to jail, and whenever he came back, the audience accepted him as a star every time, be it Naam, Khalnayak, Munna Bhai, MBBS. So I wanted to explore that stardom, and also beyond their stardom, the stars as humans. As a writer, I want to humanize the enigma. That is my, to treat them as humans, and jitna zyada ho sake, even though sometimes I do not have the access to them. So irrespective of that, to use their voice in the book, what is their take on each important event of their life, be it a positive event or a negative event. Their voice is very important. Access may not be that important.
Is there any fun anecdote that you want to tell us about Sanjay Dutt? That none of us know about, because you've written it from a very different perspective. You have handled it from the father-son point of view. Am I right? From
yeah, that is, but very small, because I think there are messages that we have to stop. So I'll just, there's this one line anecdote which I always remember, that while he was in jail, he was charged with Tada, which was a very dangerous law at that time. So he was writing this mercy petition to the President of India. And Sanjay Dutt writes a mercy petition, and this is a very senior police officer told me from Bombay. So he's writing, and he wrote a very, very nice mercy petition which his lawyer dictated or whatever. And while signing his name, he writes "Cheers." so that is Sanjay Dutt for you. And there are like at least 100 anecdotes in the book, which kind of ends. It's like a black comedy. all
Yes,
despite
yes.
every tragedy in his life, something or the other which makes you laugh, and it makes a
I
great
think,
story.
yeah.
That's a great
I'm sorry. I think, yeah, we're being asked to, close the show, and
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
really
yeah.
sorry about the glitch that happened.
A
But
perfectly fascinating session. Thank you, everyone.
absolutely. Just one
Thank
last
you.
question to all of you, really, and I'm going to go from one to the other. What is it that you will tell the aspiring biographers? What points should they bear in mind when embarking on an exercise such as yours? Kishwar, you want to take that first, quickly, please?
Okay, we have to give very quick answers because I think
Yes,
they're
yes,
desperate for
yes,
us to get off.
yes,
I
yes,
think definitely do your research. I mean, there's nothing more important than research, 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 research. I have nothing more to
yes.
say. Yes.
Ritu, what about you? What's your
Well, I mean,
piece of
of
wisdom?
course, I agree with Kishwar. The research is critical. I mean, without it, you
Yes,
can't write a life. But I would say my one-liner is don't overwrite. Don't
yes.
overwrite because people have only so much patience. They can only read and absorb so much. So,
My
Yes,
I'll
so
rephrase the same thing. Research is very
yes,
important. पाँच
yes.
किलो पढ़िए और 5 ग्राम लिखिए. Is my
Wonderful,
my
wonderful,
my one
wonderful,
liner.
wonderful. Thank you. I really hope that we had more time, but thank you for this. We'll take this discussion another
thank
time,
you. It was
another
lovely,
place.
Thank
Thank
actually.
you.
you,
I'm so
thank
Lovely,
glad
you,
that
lovely
you
thank you
all
so
talking.
much.
managed to share whatever because it's very rare that we can talk like this.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Yes,
we should
yeah.
Wonderful.
absolutely.
do
Thank
it.
you so
Truly
much.
fascinating.
Thank you
Thank you.
so
Lovely.
much.
It
We'll
was
have it
lovely.
another
Thank
way.
you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you
So,
so much. Thank you.
bye, Kishwar. Bye, Yasser.
Bye,
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye. Bye bye.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye. It was
Thank you. Bye.
great talking to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kishwar Desai, Yasser Usman, Ritu Menon, and Aruna Dhir for being PILF guests. Our next session begins at 5:30 p.m. after a break of 15 minutes. You will not want to miss Life Mantras, What Matters Most with Ms. Shobha De and Dr. Manjuri Prabhu.